So we should probably think about getting started. People are still coming in, but that's fine. Let me see here. I need to share my screen. I guess desktop, yes. Yes. And then I still need the participants. Yeah. Oh, that's not going to work, is it? Some of you might have already seen some of the stuff I'm going to talk about because it's Preflight profiles, or rather Preflight reports in pdfToolbox. And I've done a session on this a little bit at the VIP event. Difference is the last one. The difference is that I'm going to start from scratch here and go over the where things live and where you can find information and so on. So this is a bit of a difficult topic in the sense that we're dealing with a report, a Preflight report that is based on HTML technology. So usually when there are questions about profiles and so on, I can just on the fly do whatever you want. With these HTML templates, that can be a little bit more tricky because you have to build an HTML templates, and those are not that simple, but we'll figure something out. So what I'm going to do here, I just obscured my own file, so this is what I wanted. What I'm going to do here is first define what we're talking about. And what we're talking about is I have pdfToolbox desktop open well, usually I say the best thing to develop something is pdfToolbox desktop. In this particular case, I actually prefer the CLI for reasons that will become a little bit more clear soon, I hope. But I have pdfToolbox desktop open and I have a profile here. This is a prepared profile. I've done some special stuff with it, but I will come back to that. But it is just a Preflight profile, and actually I can use whatever Preflight profile I have here. So this one is a newspaper ads one, so let me take the normal newspaper ad profile. And what we're talking about is what happens when we do Preflight. So I can run this on the file that I have open. It has fixes in it, so it's going to ask me where to save the results. And then once I've done that, I get some results in this window here. And this shows me what exactly happened during Preflight. So there were some fixes. There is one error in there, and then there are some warnings in there as well. The technical term for this, and this will come, we'll need this a little bit later when we look at the template. Technical term for this is these are fix-ups, and you'll see that come back. And everything that is not a fix-up is a hit. That's the name that, or the term that pdfToolbox uses. A Preflight check gives a hit, and then it's up to the profile to determine whether that hit is going to be reported as an error, a warning, and pdfToolbox has a third possible severity level, and that would be an information. Yeah, but technically, the three types are the same. They're all hits. They just have a different severity level. That'll come back when we look at the template a little bit later. But so now we have results, and when we have results, it means I can create a report. And that report is going to be saved somewhere. By default, it has underscore report in the name. And then I can choose which type of report. And the ones we're interested in here is the PDF report custom. Unfortunately, it's called differently when you look at it in the CLI. I think there the type is template. And I think when you look at it in Switch, in the properties of the pdfToolbox configurator, there it's also called template or something similar. So the naming is not very consistent throughout the different areas. But we want this custom report because this is the one that is built on an HTML template and the one that we as a result can completely modify and make our own. And what I'm going to do is, I didn't actually try this one before this session, so I hope that one still works. I'm going to choose one of the templates here, and we'll get back to this in much more detail, but I have 4 templates in this library. Templates are stored in the active library, and my library here is Prepress, Color, and Transparency. Yeah. So in this library, I have 4 report templates. If you try this, you will only have 1, and it will be the last one, and it will have a different name. I think the default name is Overview, if I remember correctly, which is a bad name. So we should try to fix that for pdfToolbox 12. But that's the only one that you'll find in that library. But obviously you can add more because I did so. So that's one, and then I can also choose whether I want an overview or not, and that is a first page with a list of the errors and warnings and so on that were found, and I want that. So I'm going to say okay, and yes, I know it already exists, so you can overwrite that. And what happens while this is being done? What happens from a pdfToolbox point of view is that pdfToolbox did preflights. Out of the preflight, you had information about the document, you have information about the fix-ups, you have information about errors and warnings. Those things are stored somewhere, preflight results. And then pdfToolbox uses built-in PDF chip technology to convert this HTML template I have, merge it with the preflight results that came out of this preflight. So all of this information about the fix-ups, warnings, errors, and then convert that HTML template into a PDF. And that is the PDF that I get here. So the final report is a PDF file. The source, however, is an HTML template. And it has a certain look. It has a bunch of stuff on there. It has document information and a lot of stuff that I think is not very useful on there. And it has a list of errors, warnings, and fix-ups. Yeah? And we have multiple pages here, actually. I have I can scroll through pages now. I should use that. So I have a second page, which is just some information about my version and operating system. And then I have the same pages as I had in the document, overlaid, if there are errors or warnings, overlaid with annotations. Yeah. But the part we're going to focus on here is this first part, which is the one that comes from the HTML template. You can also switch this off, by the way. You don't have to generate this first page with the overview. If you deselect overview while you generate a preflight report, you will not get this, but you will only get the pages from the document itself. That's also an option, and sometimes it can be useful. Okay, so let me close this. And now I could do a preflight again if I wanted to show something more about reports, but a trick that not everyone knows is that this preflight information is not lost. It's still there. And if you say go forward on the preflight window here, it will go back to my preflight information for this document. And I can go back to create report. So if you're working with pdfToolbox desktop and you want to generate multiple types of reports, for example, to test something, then you can do that quite easily by each time generating a report, you'll get back to this list. And then on that window, you just click go forward and you go back to your preflight results without having to go through reopening the original document and then doing the preflight again and going to create report again. So we're back to our results there. And now I can do the same thing. And this time I can select a different preflight template. And there are a few here. I will show you where they live so you can download them. But I have 3 here that are a little bit more intelligent than what is bundled with pdfToolbox 11. The first one is kind of a general use profile, and this is the one I'm going to concentrate on here. But there are 2 more. There is one that is specific for a 2-page document. Actually, I could show this as well at some point. And then there is one that is specific for the case where you have a file that consists of one page, but you also want to show a special separation. For example, you know that this is a file that comes in and it has a cut contour, and for the customer, you want to show the actual file and then next to it, the cut contour. So this report has some specific logic for that, and this report has some specific logic for two-page documents. Yeah, and actually, I'll show you how this one looks. Again, I have not tried this before I did this session. I only tried the top one, but we'll take the risk. So most common mistake in pdfToolbox is to generate a second report, go through all the motions and click save without realizing that you have not changed this to the custom report. pdfToolbox has a tendency of moving this back to PDF report, which is the old PDF format that is not modifiable, customizable. This one is customizable. Yeah, so don't forget to switch it back to the report type that you want. So we'll just generate this again, and I'm going to say replace. Remark that the file doesn't go through all the stuff again. It doesn't get corrected a second time. We just use the Preflight results from the last time we did this. So as you can see, this looks completely different. And I like this report much better for many reasons, one of which is that it is much more compact. That was the goal of this report. So we tried to make the information here much more compact and only show the things that are really relevant to people. Also, this is, like I said, this is a Preflight report that was created specifically for workflows where you have files that either have one page or two pages. If you have a multi-page document, the Preflight template that comes with pdfToolbox 11 by default will simply show you a preview of the first page. And in general, that is about all you can do because you don't know how many pages you're going to have. If you know that you're making a workflow, for example, for business cards, where you can expect either one for a recto business card or 2 pages for recto verso, then you can do a little bit better than that, and you can make a Preflight report that is customized for that specific workflow. And that's perhaps one of the first things that is important in this context, and that I think we don't consider enough, is that a Preflight report doesn't have to be the same for all jobs that you process through workflows. You can actually be given what you have available as technology here to modify this, to customize it. You can be much, much more intelligent if you can have multiple templates for multiple types of jobs that are being processed. And of course, it's additional work. Because you will, in that case, you will need to make separate Preflight report templates, and that takes time, but the added value to people can be quite significant as well. If I have business cards, having this kind of view where you have the page size nicely mentioned around, and where you have a preview image for either one page or the 2 pages in the file is, well, for clients, this is much, much easier to interpret than the standard stuff. You can also see that there is some additional information here for, this is all the errors and warnings, but it says here, for example, one time on page 2, one time on page 2. So there is some more specific, in those cases where it is available, there is some specific information on where errors occurred in the document. That is also something that is not present in the default report. The more information section in this is much more limited, because I think that most of the things we show in the standard report are not really useful, not even to Prepress people, let alone clients. And then the color information section has been reworked a little bit and is showing small color patches. This will also work for spot colors, by the way. And it shows the name of the color, and then it also shows ink percentages. I'm not saying that you have to do this in all cases, but you can. And the most important point to remember is that you have this flexibility. So you have the ability to modify a report and show exactly what you want. As you can see, this goes much further than just saying, I don't want to show some information. It is really tailoring the information that is in here to a particular workflow, or you could do it for a particular customer and so on. And of course, it should be obvious by now that all of the artwork that we have here can also be modified, because this looks entirely different than the other report. In fact, this one is intelligent enough that, and again, whether you like that or not is something else, but this one is intelligent enough that if you pre-flight a file and the pre-flight goes through successfully, then all these colors, the text and so on, will all be in green. There will be a green check mark, but the whole report will look green as well, which from a client point of view makes it immediately, but also from a Prepress point of view actually, makes it immediately clear that this file had errors because there is a red pre-flight report that is generated. If everything goes well, you'll have a green one to show that there are no problems with this particular file. Yeah, so this is what happens. And then the question is, how does this happen? Where does this stuff come from? How do we go from this to the PDF that we just saw? And like I said in the beginning, this is tied together because pdfToolbox takes the pre-flight results and it looks for a template and then it does stuff with that template. What does the template look like? Well, you can go to Browse here. This is also the easiest way to get there. You can go to Browse, and Browse will show you a folder, and in that folder there are 4 subfolders. There are 4 items here, so we can quite easily assume that each of these subfolders represents one of those pre-flight templates, and that is exactly the case. So if I open these, they will all look more or less the same. In each case, you will find what is important is you will find an HTML file there. That is the main HTML that is going to be converted by pdfToolbox into a PDF report. So we have that in all of these folders. Strictly speaking, I think it doesn't have to be called index.html. I know when you use place content in pdfToolbox, which uses the same technology, you have a little bit more freedom there. But there is also a manifest.xml file. And this manifest XML is also important in this case. Yeah. And let me show you what is in there. So each of these folders represents something that is going to be converted, which means that by modifying the HTML and the JavaScript and the CSS that we have in there, we'll modify the pre-flight report that is being generated. Now, if I still had Visual Studio Code open, that would actually be helpful. There we go. You don't need to use this editor. I started making the joke that every time I do something like this, I show a different editor and tell you that this is the best thing I've ever seen. I'm still on Visual Studio Code, and it's been more than a year now, so this one might be a keeper. We don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's made by Microsoft, but still, I like it. It's very, very surprising. It even plays nicely on the Mac. So you see the same folders here. I just opened Visual Studio Code and I dragged in the main folder, so it displays all of the content here, and that makes it very easy to edit this, modify this, and so on. Yeah. So let's start with the manifests. The manifest is an XML file, and in that XML file you can store some information. Not that much, but it is quite important information because this is the link between, or a link between pdfToolbox, the processing engine, also the engine that generates the pre-flight report, and your template. And what this does, for example, is there is something here that is called X display name. You have to have the element names exactly the same. So you don't have to write that down. I'll show you where these templates live afterwards. So this is the name that is going to be visible in pdfToolbox desktop. So if I go back to pdfToolbox and we go back to create report, an updated compact A4 report for general use, well, that is exactly the same as what we have here. So if you make a new template, you can make a new template by taking this folder, duplicating it, giving it a different name, obviously. But if you want the name to be different in pdfToolbox in the desktop version, you will need to change this name. Yeah, that's one. There is another very useful thing, especially when you're making this template, and that is there is an element here under settings where you can say keep temp, and I can change that to true. If I do that, each time pdfToolbox creates a Preflight report, it is going to also give me a folder with the modified template in it, and in that folder I'll have all the JSON files that pdfToolbox generates and so on. So this gives me all the temporary stuff that I can look at to see probably why my report didn't generate the way I expected it to generate. So while you're doing debugging, testing, setting this to true and seeing what kind of information pdfToolbox generates in that folder can be quite helpful. If you're going to use this in production, please set this to false, because it will generate lots and lots of information each time you run this, and that's not what you want on the production system. But you can flip that if you're doing testing. And then there is some other stuff in here. And the reason this other stuff is here is that by default, pdfToolbox gives you Preflight information that you can use in your HTML and JavaScript. However, it doesn't give you all the information that it could give you. And the reason for that is performance. If you're generating a very simple report with not too much information in it, and that's all you need, then we don't want to take up time to generate all kinds of detailed information that you're not using afterwards anyway. So pdfToolbox can generate a lot of stuff. If you wanted to generate it, then you need to specify stuff here. Yeah. And what you have here is there are, in general, 3 different things that can be useful. The first one is, well, let me start with the preview. That's the easiest one. The preview is what you saw on the report. There was a little thumbnail of the first page and the second page of the document. Well, that is generated because I have this. And I can set the resolution field to decide how high in resolution I want to go. I can set first page and last page to determine how many pages I want to see or how many thumbnails I want to have generated. Also, a kind of an important setting, I mean, if in your report, if you only show a thumbnail for the first page, you don't have to generate more or ask pdfToolbox to generate more thumbnails. Then just switch that off or set it to just specify first page or set last page to 1 and make sure it only generates 1 image. If you want to do a report where you know you're working with a brochure and it's always going to be 8 pages and it would be cool to have a page where you have an overview of all 8 pages, by all means, you can say generate 1 to 8 or 1 to 16, depending on what you have in the brochure. And there are some tricks, you'll find it in the documentation. There are some tricks to say all pages or stuff like that as well. So that is a possibility. Yeah. The resolution setting depends on how big you're going to display the thumbnail. If you know that you're generating an A4 report and your thumbnail is going to take up half of the report, then you might even want to go a little bit higher than 150, but that's totally up to what you need. So that's for 1. The second piece of information that pdfToolbox can generate for you is an XML report. And this sounds really weird because we're generating...
Sorry, yeah. David, I have just
yes.
one question according to the resolution.
Yes.
Is it possible to not only having a less resolution than the one you have just here, but in the same time, not only having a less resolution, but also having, for example, a grade instead of CMYK or RGB in a screenshot.
Okay, no.
No. Okay.
I don't think so. Mark is here as well, I think, from Callas. If I lie, Mark, you can correct me, but as far as I know, you can't do that at the moment.
Okay.
However, I will explain what the visualizer means, and that might actually give you a solution.
Okay.
One question, David. I haven't tried it yet, but is it possible, instead of writing resolution like that, to also write it with maximum pixels by maximum pixels? The reason I'm asking, because 150 ppi generate sometimes very large PDFs when the original PDF is a large one, like 1 by 3 meter. And it would be nice to enter here.
Yeah, I have not tried that. We would have
a maximum
to try.
pixel. That would. I haven't tried it either, so yeah. I thought we might. But you know, the same syntax as in PDF, as we save as image, where we define instead of PPI max pixel width and height.
Yes,
would be nice for the reports.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't tried. I would expect it to work. The only reason I hesitate is because I know that the Preflight report template is the first place where this HTML to PDF was, was actually used in pdfToolbox. So this goes back a couple of years. So I'm not sure. We can try it afterwards. It shouldn't be difficult to try. Yeah, but the color you can't change, but let me also explain what the visualizer does, and that will be an answer to that question, I think. Let me talk about the report first, though. What I said was it's very weird to see something here where you generate an XML report, because what we're actually generating is a PDF report. So why do you need the XML? Well, the reason for that is the communication mechanism that Callas uses to give you information in your template. So what Callas does, what pdfToolbox does in this instance, is it does Preflight, and then in a file called CALS_params, it will, this is basically JavaScript objects that we have in there. So in this file, it will generate the information that you need. Now, if you look at this, you'll see that this is boilerplate. This hasn't been run anywhere anytime soon. Actually, it refers to version 7, so that's how old this is. Yeah. So this is just a file that I have in my template folder. But each time when I do a Preflight, pdfToolbox will copy this whole template folder, and then it will give me, it will overwrite this calsparam.js file with new information for the Preflight that I just did. Yeah? And this is why, if you look at the manifests, setting this thing to true can actually be quite useful. So I can set this to true, and then I'll get a folder, and in that folder that is generated, I will also be able to see what pdfToolbox puts in that calsparams for the Preflight that I just did. And if you're trying to figure out how to use that information in your template, then this is a nice way of doing that. Yeah? But that still doesn't answer why I need to generate an XML report. Well, the information that you'll find in this calsparams, it goes into some detail. For example, you already see a list of plates in the file. You have some information about the pages in the file, and there's Preflight information in there as well. So pdfToolbox does put quite a bit of information into this JSON file, but it doesn't put everything there, far from. So if I want to use more detailed information about the document or about what happened during Preflight, a possible way to do that, and actually the only way to do it if you're doing this during Preflight, is that I can ask pdfToolbox to also generate me an XML report. And the sequence of events in that case becomes a little bit different. So what I just said is we do Preflight. pdfToolbox gives me a copy of this template folder. it overwrites colors params. Well, if I have this line in my manifest file, it will also create a subfolder called XML in this case. And in that subfolder, it will create a file called report.xml. And that is exactly the same as the report, as the XML report that would normally be generated in pdfToolbox CLI or in Switch. Yeah. And that means that in that report XML, I have all the details of the Preflight I just went through. And using JavaScript in my template, I can get that information out of there. And I'll show how you can do that as well, because there is some supporting JavaScript for that to make your life easier. Yeah, so that's the reason that you might see that here. Of course, generating an XML report, again, is an extra step. It means that pdfToolbox is going to create an additional file, which is a file operation, IO operation. So it all takes time. And by default, it will not do that. However, you can ask it in the manifest to do that. And then the third thing here, and this is more recent, this was only added in pdfToolbox 11, I think, if I remember correctly. The first thing that you have here is the visualizer part. And why is that? Well, I'm assuming that everyone knows what visualizer is, but never assume, they say. So let me show you. All of these things here are the visualizer. So I can get this beautiful ink coverage report. Wouldn't it be nice if I could also include this image in my Preflight report? Because maybe people want to see that. Maybe they don't want to see this, but maybe they want to see, and I'm not sure I have a good file for that, but no, I didn't. It was only spot. So maybe I have a cut contour as a spot separation in here, and I want to show people that. Or maybe I want to make a Preflight report that shows individual separations, yeah? Or I want to show the black separation or some specific spot color. All of those things can be done using the visualizer, but they were not available in a Preflight report until pdfToolbox 11, because now I can specify this in my manifest, and this contains the parameters that you would normally use for the visualizer CLI command, and it works in exactly the same way. So what I basically tell pdfToolbox here is I am interested in one of the ink coverage views, and it's actually ink temp, which is this gradation that I have from yellow for slightly over to red for really, really over. Yeah, so I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in separations. And then I have some options. I can generate separations using their own color, which means the cyan separation will be rendered with cyan and the magenta separation will be rendered with magenta. That's an option in the visualizer, so I can set that here as well. And I can set all of the limits that I have. For example, for ink coverage, I have to say, what do I consider to be over? Well, in this case, it's 250%. And then there are some resolution settings that I pass along here as well. What it boils down to is that for any image that the visualizer can generate, you can request that image from pdfToolbox, and that is by specifying this visualizer section in the Preflight, in the manifest file. And when I put that in there, pdfToolbox is going to generate me additional images. Yeah, so that's the manifest. Let's actually run this. I modified version 5. So let's run this and see what happens. I've also switched on the save temp. So we'll see what that does. We still have our Preflight results here. I will not let pdfToolbox fool me into generating an old style report. I do want an overview, and I want the general use. That's the one that we just changed. And now if I generate that, we should get a report, and we should also get a additional folder that we can explore and see what's going on. So this is the report. Again, it looks slightly different because this is a different template. And now let me see whether pdfToolbox was nice enough to also give me this. So I already have two. Apparently I did that once before as well. Let's hope it's this one. So I'm just going to drag that in here. I want to add that to my workspace. Thank you very much. So the folder it generates is exactly the same. Let me close these things. So this is the folder it just generated for me. It is exactly the same as my compact Preflight report folder. pdfToolbox has added some things. For example, it has added a result, and that result, I open the folder itself, that result is, of course, the Preflight report that was just generated. Yeah. So we can now look at that. What it also did is what I said before is when I go to scripts, I told you about this cals_params file, which is a JavaScript file containing some objects here. So environment information, this was generated on June 3rd, well, a couple minutes ago. So that's the one that we should be looking at. And then I have information about the report. What you can see here is that for the pages where the pages that were in the original PDF file, I asked pdfToolbox to generate images. I have the thumbnail, and that is now living here. So this gives me the full URL to that thumbnail. It is in a folder called images, in a folder called Calas pages, and so on. So if I go to my folder and we look at images, and I look at Calas pages 150, the first page, this is the thumbnail that we asked for. And that thumbnail was also generated for the second page. Yeah. So pdfToolbox generated the images for me, and it also gives me the URL to those pages. So it's easy to include that in my HTML now and then in the final report. I also asked for some visualizer stuff, and well, all the visualizer stuff has been created as well. Yeah. In that same folder we just saw, I now have the black, cyan, magenta, and yellow separations. And I also have this temperature preview that I asked for. Yeah. So again, these things are there because I asked for them specifically in the manifest file. They are generated always into the images folder, but pdfToolbox gives you all the links to those files so that you can pick them up afterwards and use them in the template. The only annoying thing here is that there is no information for these images. Yeah, the only thing I have is a URL. So if you want to know what the separation images are, for example, you'll have to look at the name of the file and then deduct the name of the separation from that. It would be nice if there would be some kind of tagging here that also explains what you're looking at, but that is not there. So you have to look at the name of the file for that. The other thing I asked in the manifest, if you remember, is an XML file. So if I now go back to my folder again, if we look at this folder, I asked for the XML file in a subfolder called XML. So that was created, and the XML is in there. And if I open it up, you'll see that it is a standard, completely standard XML report with the results section in there and all the hits and the fix-ups and so on. So exactly the same XML file as would be generated if you use the CLI and you ask for an XML report, or if you use Switch and in the pdfToolbox configurator, you ask for an XML report there. Yeah. And of course, this is a little bit more complex than getting information out of here. This is JavaScript, so this is easy. You just add this file into your HTML and you can start using the contents of it. That's easy. For the XML report, you have to jump through a few hoops in order to get to the information, but it does contain a lot more information than what you have here. Is everyone still following? Any questions? No one dares to ask anything. So
just one question
yes.
about the last PNG images you gave. Are the resolution relative to the previous resolution you mentioned in the manifest XML itself?
Yeah, so in the manifest, you specify that separately, actually. Yeah. Okay. So the resolution setting for the bitmaps, or for the, not bitmaps, for the thumbnails is under preview.
Okay.
And then for the visualizer, you can specify resolutions there as well. And actually, the resolution, I should show the whole thing. So the resolution part is here. That's where it determines what the output images are going to have as resolution. And then you also have a way to specify the which pages you're interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question. Is there any plans of making the XML in version 2?
What do you mean by the XML in version 2?
XML version 2 instead of version 1. Version 1 is kind of old, and the version 2 is a little bit easier to work with XSLT and stuff.
I have
in
no
that
idea.
case, I would even ask change to JSON and allow this JSON to be generated during runtime instead of having a static file.
Yeah, that would be the more logical request, I think, unless you disagree, Anne. But if I would have to make a request, I probably would ask for something that has a JSON format as well. Because
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Plus, I know that the XML report from Callas is not the easiest to work with the references that go on from well, where you have to pick up information from different parts of the workflow. So it's
tricky.
It is tricky. Yeah. If you have feature requests, don't hesitate to send them in. I will gladly pass them on to Mark from Callas, who is now here as well. So. He should have heard this one as well. But I know he always wants an email as official proof that it's not just me inventing stuff. Not that I would ever do that, obviously.
No, I thought it's always me. That is what I get told all the time. So it's also already two of us.
Yes. I think we asked for some. I think some people asked for too much stuff, and now he needs. Anyway, so
more people are asking for a feature as higher it gets on our feature list. So
the more people, but if we ask it here in the cafe, we have all the participants basically who ask for it. So
give me a list, I'll put it on the list, and you're also in charge of putting things on the list, David. So feel free.
Yeah, I know if I ask for it too much, I'm gonna end up writing the specification for it. I know.
This was my intention.
Okay, so that's the manifest file. Of course, all the other stuff happens in the HTML. And in fact, there are templates, and I will show you in a second where you can download some of this stuff to start from. But this is just HTML. You're not obliged to follow what happens here at all. Yeah, this is just one way of doing things. I like to think that especially these new templates are a pretty structured way of doing it and an easy way, but you don't have to follow that. What you'll see is that in these templates, you will have a Calas library folder. The idea is that you don't touch that. You can use the stuff that is in there, but you don't modify it. That gives us the ability to modify it and fix bugs if anyone finds any. And then you have other folders for the fonts that you want to use in your particular template, the images that you want to use, the scripts that you want to write. Watch out, here you also have this cals params. You should not modify that because pdfToolbox is just going to overwrite it anyway. So there is no point. And then styles would be a regular CSS that you use in your template. Once again, you don't have to follow the structure at all. The only thing that is important is that you provide an index.html file that is converted by pdfToolbox, and you can do anything that you would do on a normal website in there. So if you want to structure this completely differently, then you can. It just has to be valid HTML. What we do in this template, like I said, is a few specific things, like including these Calas library files to make life a little bit easier, but also I include the scripts.cals params. This is this file that is automatically created by pdfToolbox, and by including it, I can then just pick up information from it and use that in my template. And then specifically for these templates, I have a preferences JavaScript file, and I have a script JavaScript file that does the actual logic. Now, before I go on looking at this in a little bit more detail, where did I get these from? Because you don't get these from pdfToolbox 11. The only one there is the overview. I would highly suggest, you're entirely free, but I would highly suggest that you don't use the template that I showed you earlier. So if I go back to my Preflight results, the one that in other libraries is called Overview, I have renamed it here a little bit, but the one that is called Overview and that is included in pdfToolbox 11, I would highly suggest that you do not use that as the basis for your own templates, because it's rather old by now, and I think that the templates that you find here are better. Whereas here, well, Calas Software has a GitHub repository. You don't need to know what GitHub is. It is, if you want to know, it's source code repository. You don't have to know what it is, you just have to know it exists. You get there by going to GitHub and searching for Calas Software, or by going to github.com and then Calas Software. So I can just, well, actually I should take the whole thing and I'll also put that in the chat window there. So that's the URL to it. That will lead you to either directly to the folder about Preflight reports, or if you just go to the GitHub page, it will lead you to this. Yeah. On there you have two very nice pictures. One is for me, the other one is Ulrich from Calas. But what interests us here is this section called Preflight reports. And in that Preflight report section, you have a bunch of Preflight reports. Preflight report templates, I should say. The ones that I have downloaded and I'm working with here are these last three. So 05, 6, and 7. Yeah. 4 is not bad either, or 4A. Those two are more modern as well. The other ones are much older and I would probably no longer use. Yeah. So if you want to start from something, then these 3 are a good starting point, or the numbers 4 are a good starting point. How do you get them? Well, the easiest is that you ignore all the stuff about how to use GitHub, and you just say download zip, and that will give you a zip file with all of these files or all of these folders in there, and you can start from there. How do you make them into your own reports? Well, as I said before, you go to create report and you do browse, and that opens up that folder. You can put your templates in there and then get going with modifying that. These reports are part of the library system. So if I go, actually, I think they are here. Yeah. Where are they already here or are they not here? I always forget. Yeah, here. They were not at some point, but now they are. So you can just go to manage libraries, and there you will also see them. So if you want to copy them to another library, then you can. The one that you see here that is called overview is the one that is specific to pdfToolbox 11. So that's the one you always have there. But if you want to add them, you can copy them from one library to another. Yeah. So just copy one of them into your folder that you have, and then this will give you the same structure and you can start modifying stuff. Okay, that's a bit of an overview. I want to show you one thing that I've done just to highlight some of the capabilities that you have in modern versions of pdfToolbox. Let me go back to pdfToolbox, and I will go back to the original file. And then I need to find the profile that I modified a little bit. Yeah. And what did I modify in here? Well, I have a bunch of fix-ups in here. And I thought the one that was the easiest to show is this one. I have a fix-up in here. Each fix-up, starting with, I believe, pdfToolbox 10, but I could be mistaken, has a field that is called custom ID. The same for checks. Yeah? So they all have something that is called custom ID. You can put something in there. What you put in there can be a number. It can be anything. But pdfToolbox is always going to interpret it as a piece of text, and it's going to completely ignore whatever you put there. That doesn't sound like a very useful feature, but it actually is. So I have the word silent in here. I'm going to remove that for now, and we'll save our report. And now I'm going to run my Preflight from the start because I've modified my profile. So I want to generate a new result set. So it's going to run that. Notice that it runs convert alternate color space for spot colors. So that is a fix-up that is executed. Yeah. And if I create a report and I use my generic one that we used before. And no, bad pdfToolbox. There we go. Save. Replace. So what we should get is a Preflight report. We're also going to get another one of these folders because I don't think I have set that setting to, there we go. So I have not changed that, it's still to true. If I look at the fix-ups, it says convert alternate color space and so on and so on. Yeah, so that is mentioned in the Preflight report. Okay, we'll close that, we don't need it. And we're going to do this again. But this time I'm going to look at my fix-up again, and I'm going to put my custom ID back to silent. So I'm just putting a string in there, basically. Run it. This is a very long demo. I know this is one of the reasons why I like doing stuff like this using the CLI, because you can do it relatively quick, these kinds of cycles. Oh, create report, bad pdfToolbox, there we go. And replace. And now if you look at the fix-ups, that item is no longer there. Yeah. Why is it no longer there? Well, because I put that custom ID in there. And what happens with that custom ID, I'm going to go back to my result folder. So this is the template that was just used for this Preflight run. If I open the cals params, okay, here, where is the one that we were interested in? Here, it should be here. Convert alternate color space. So we did Preflight. Calas created the cals params file for me with all the results of the Preflight check. And as you can see, this custom ID field is copied into the information that I have here. So if you put something in that custom ID field in a check or in a fix-up, then it will show up in here. It will also show up in my XML report, by the way. So if you go look in the XML file, you'll find it there as well. But of course, it's much easier to get it from here. So what do I do with that? Well, in this case, I made a change to my, is it here or is it, I think it is. So I have something that is called insert hits and fix-ups. And that is a function that first inserts all the errors, and then it inserts the warnings, and then it inserts the information items, and then it looks at the fix-ups. And what I do here is very simple. I look at, does this fix-up have a custom ID? If so, is the custom ID equal to silent? And if it's silent, I skip it. I simply don't put it into the report. Okay? This is based on something we did for a customer not so long ago, where the idea was in the other direction. We actually implemented it in such a way that if the custom ID was set to important, then it was output to the report. And in all other cases, it was just ignored. Why would you do something like this? Well, because there are a number of fixes in pdfToolbox that make a lot of sense to do, or they have to be done because you want to be compliant to PDFX or to Gantt workgroup specifications, but your clients are not going to understand anything about what you've done there. And you can try to come up with a user-friendly way of saying how you modified their file. But in some cases, for some of these administrative fix-ups, it is much easier to simply not output them to the Preflight report and not mention that you have done them. Slippery slope, but sometimes that's the best you can do in a workflow. And so the way that is implemented once more is I've created it in the profile. I've done nothing special in the profile other than I now have the word silent in some of the fix-ups that I have. And then in this template, I added these two lines basically that say, well, if the fix-up contains that word silent in the custom ID, then just skip it and don't put it in my Preflight report. And that's why it wasn't shown in the Preflight report. You can, of course, do the same thing for checks. For hits, I have the same setup here. I get a certain hit. In this case, it's an error. And then I do stuff. I could also skip that on output. But do realize that while that is possible, it is, of course, a lot more dangerous to do because you could have a file that is failed, but the hit that fails it is not shown in the Preflight report because you've switched it off. And that's kind of a dangerous situation. I think for hits, the opposite would make a lot more sense. You could mark certain hits as important, for example, and give them a different icon or put them in a separate section or make sure that they appear at the top of the list of things rather than somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Remark that you're not limited to this. I mean, this is a template that just uses JavaScript to do things, and it's only limited by your imagination, basically. So you're not limited to using this custom ID in the way I say here. I can, off the top of my head, 2 other possible uses. You could make a profile that contains that uses a certain language. Because I know one of the questions I'm going to get afterwards. If I don't, I'll use this example. So I could make the profile Polish. I could have all the names of the pre-flight checks Polish. What happens if I also want to have a Russian translation of these things in certain circumstances? Well, pdfToolbox does offer ways of doing that. I could, first of all, I could make 2 profiles, one that is Polish and the other one that is Russian, and then run the correct one, and that would give me what I want. Second thing I could do is I can do translation. You can generate a translation dictionary from a profile run, and that would give you all the strings that were used in that profile run in a certain language, and then you can localize it to the other language. And the command line allows you to say which language you want to use, and it allows you to use that custom translation dictionary. So you can do the translation to Russian and then specify that translation dictionary when you run it. Kind of the poor man's way of doing something like this could also be that, well, I can add the Russian translation into this custom ID field of the hit. Yeah, and depending on a variable, for example, decide whether I'm going to output the name of the fix-up, which would then be the Polish version, or the custom ID of the fix-up, which would then be the Russian equivalent. So you can even use this to do some kind of translation on the fly if you choose to do so. That's one possibility. The other possibility that I haven't really done, but I'm still interested in doing, is you could use this to link each item to a more information page. I have a bunch of pre-flight checks. I have a bunch of corrections in a profile. I give each of these checks and fixes a custom ID, a number, for example. And in the report, I generate the name of the fix-up. And then afterwards, I put a hyperlink that says more information and links to a URL based on what I have in the custom ID. And that would give you a pre-flight report where you have the ability for clients to click on a link, and that link would take them to a page specifically for that particular item. And that link, that page could then explain what that item means. It could give them hints on how to fix the problem in the first place, or anything like that. So that would also be possible using that. Yeah. Most important in this, I think, is that you have to realize that the pre-flight report, if you want to do really clever things, that you don't only think about what you can do in the template, but that you can also think about, okay, so how am I organizing my pre-flight profile? And how am I going to use the information in my pre-flight profile while I create the template and have the template create an output PDF file? Because the two can work together quite nicely. The more you know about the workflow that you're running this in and the type of file that you have in this workflow, like the example I gave with a sticker that contains a cut contour or a business card that has either 1 or 2 pages. The more you know about files in the workflow, the better you can make your report in the end. Now, I haven't gone into too much detail about what you have here. There are 2 reasons for that. One, if I want to do that, I need another 2 hours, which would be painful for both you and me. But the other thing also is this is standard HTML. Yes, I do get some information from pdfToolbox. That is true. But everything else I do here is standard HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Anything that you do on a website will also work here. Yeah. So any library that you want to use, if you want to use jQuery, if you want to use anything else that you've used on, maybe you want to include a graph with the amount of errors or something like that, a more graphical representation, fine. Look for a JavaScript library that can generate that type of content and include it into your template. The engine behind this is a Google V8 JavaScript engine and is a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the Google engine. It's WebKit, that was the word I was looking for. So it's WebKit based, and you're going to get a something that is very, very similar to what you get on websites. And what Loïc says in the comments is absolutely true. This is not 100% the same as what you have on the website, for example. And the main reason is that in many cases, people make assumptions on what they have available. When they make a library, they assume that it's going to be used inside of a browser. And the context that you're using this in is, of course, slightly different. So you have to do a little bit of testing. I also used svg.js, by the way, and it works quite well. You just have to be a little bit careful how you use it. That is absolutely correct. We have done tests with more of it on the place content side, but we have done tests with some of the graph generating libraries to create pie charts and stuff like that using place content, and all of those seemed to be quite easy to integrate as well. So it's standard JavaScript, it's standard CSS. You can do whatever you want that you're used to from websites. Just realize that you're going to a page in the end. Yeah. When you look here, you'll see that there is standard HTML here. If you would look at this if you would also look at the CSS, for example, you would see that I use absolute positioning a lot more than I would on the website. And it's much easier or much more understandable to use stuff like tables and so on here, because pdfToolbox doesn't have any issue with that. It can be a problem on websites, but to generate a paper report, that's not a problem whatsoever.
I have a question, David, regarding specific template according to different users.
Yes.
Let's imagine I'm using Switch, and I have several different external agencies and graphic team too. And I would like to have a dedicated and in which I could have variable, in which I could have the dedicated, for example, logo type of the external agency and maybe the surname of the graphic team or the guy who sent previously the file.
Yes.
Would it be feasible?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All the variables that you define in pdfToolbox are passed along here. And actually, do I use variables for that? I am actually not certain. If I look at what happens, I'm trying to think whether I can show you at least some example.
Yep.
But I'm not 100% certain. So this shows the separations, yes. And I think that my script in this case, yes. Yes, and where does that come from? That is a good, okay. So this is going to be a bit cryptic by nature because I can just point to this, but any variable that you define, including variables that are passed to pdfToolbox through Switch, for example, are made available to to the template. So in this cals res info vars thing, and that comes from this calas params file, you will have every variable. And in this template, I use it to figure out what separation it is that you want me to show in the template. Yeah. So to follow your logic, Axel, maybe I have a customer who wants to see a white, because that's what happens on his files. And maybe I have another customer who wants to see a silver varnish because his files always contain that and he wants to visualize it separately. This template was made in such a way that if you specify a variable called separation, that is going to be used to determine which of the visualizer images is shown in the template report. Yeah. So along the same lines, it would be quite easy to have a variable that is the name of a customer, or maybe the name of an image that is his logo file. And in your templates, make sure that that logo is used instead of the generic Kala software logo or pdfToolbox logo on the templates. It's absolutely possible.
Okay.
You can control which CSS file it will use also from a variable, so you can have a totally restyled report for one customer and then totally different for another one.
Yeah, the challenge is, and this is why this is a difficult topic, and I think it's also why this is used less than I would like to see it used, because it's a very powerful feature. But the challenge is that on the one hand, you have the whole thing about Preflight and so on. On the other hand, you have the Preflight engine and everything that pdfToolbox does with that. But on the other hand, you have this thing that is based on HTML and CSS and so on. So you have to know how to write an HTML file that is then going to be converted by pdfToolbox into a proper template report. And while it is not rocket science, it is not trivial either. Believe me, I've made some of these. So you have to think a little bit on how you do that and what preview that you want. But in general, everything is possible. Usually what happens in projects where I get involved is I tell the customer, okay, give me a design that you want. Yeah, tell me how it's supposed to look. I mean, you know what kind of information you normally have on these files. So take an example of a Preflight report with all the information. Ask a designer or someone who is a little bit creative, not me, to come up with a good design, something that looks nice. And whatever they come up with, it should be relatively straightforward to rebuild that in an HTML template. Yeah? And then you have to decide how much dynamic stuff do you want in there. And that mostly boils down to how much JavaScript are you going to have to write in order to make this happen. More questions from anyone? I think we're just about done with what you can handle as well. I think, I mean, an hour and 15 minutes is probably about the maximum for most people. But if you have questions, I'll be more than happy.
David, do I refer to the PDF chip documentation to learn more about this transformation?
Yes and no. So the technology is the same. Yeah. So the basic HTML to PDF capabilities are the same between this and PDF chip. The details about, of course, how this fits together in here is a little bit different. If you read the documentation about PDF chip, you'll also find documentation on the print pages function and so on. And because there is a whole graphics loop in PDF chip, that is different here. Yeah. So there are some detailed changes, but if you want to understand what the kind of things are that you can do in CSS to get proper CMYK and spot color and all of that stuff, and how to handle fonts, and all of those things are identical.
So one use case I can think of would be something like a sign-off sheet, where maybe I wanted to add some form fields, maybe a digital signature field, maybe have a submit button to report back the approval or disapproval or comments and fields that I created. Is that something we can do with this, this system?
So, no. Yes and no. So of course, all of the generation of the sign-off bit, all of the graphic stuff you can do. This does not have the capability of adding form fields or digital signature fields. So you'd have to find a different solution for that part. Yeah. In general, when it comes to annotations and form fields and digital signatures, it's all a little bit of the same. pdfToolbox doesn't really have that much capabilities on that end. And certainly for generating them, I don't think we have many opportunities there yet. I know that some of these questions are on the wish list also for pdfChip, specifically for annotations, for example. But the possibilities you have at the moment are not, well, you don't have many possibilities at the moment. What you could, of course, do is generate all the graphical content here and then try to merge that with some other document, or add the digital signature afterwards. That is something that would be possible. But again, not with pdfToolbox. You'd have to use other technology to add the digital signature field.
How about something like if we wanted to have a little JavaScript in the PDF that actually would, let's say, do a flip book, or instead of having all the separations be visible all the time, we could have like a next and previous.
Same thing. Same thing. All of those fields are really out of bounds for the PDF generation engine. What you could try in some cases, I'm not sure about digital signatures, but I'm not even sure it would work. What I was thinking is maybe you can generate the graphical content first and then do an overlay with some other content, but I'm not even sure whether overlay would keep the annotations that you add or all the other stuff. So in general, I think it's not going to work really well.
How are layers treated in the previews? Can you control which layers are visible?
You can, so first of all, in the Preflight report that you generate, you have the overview pages and then you have the detail pages. There is an option to generate detail pages that contain layers to show Preflight errors, more details on where the errors are. pdfChip, I believe, now has options to generate layers in a PDF, but I'm not sure whether those are available yet in the Preflight technology. That I would have to test.
But for the composite and separation previews, does it obey the print or visible tags on the layers?
When you overlay two files, you mean?
No, when it generates the preview of the page or the separation PNG file.
Yes.
Does it obey the visible? It does. Okay.
Yeah. The preview that you get, it's the same as in Visualizer. The preview that you get is always a high quality preview of the document as it is at that point. So if you have invisible layers in there, then the preview will not contain the invisible layers. It will honor that. Okay. It will look the same as it should look on a good rip. Let's put it that way. Okay, any other questions? Okay, that's it from my side. Like I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me afterwards. I think it is, even though I said good morning in the beginning, it is time for me to get some dinner and something to drink here. And for many of you, that will be the same. So have a great evening, or if it's still earlier in the day, a great rest of the day.
Thanks, David.
Have fun.